Hi everyone, how are you? This is Bethany Gagne, founder of Numinous, the organization that sponsors the Resonant Peaceful Cities Project. And this is the 5th video in a series that I'm doing that is about kind of chunking down heightened consciousness, right? Because people just think heightened consciousness maybe is something that's inobtainable, that they can't reach, that it's only for, quote, the enlightened. And actually what heightened consciousness is just training our brain waves to be able to sustain a higher level of well-being. And we are all capable of this. It doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what grieves and losses you've had. You train your nervous system to up-level. And I've often used some of the most traumatic things in my life to up-level. So it doesn't matter what's happened, whether you've lost someone, whether you've been through a trauma, that you can up-level and eventually kind of not have the pang of that grief, or eventually not have the kind of basically pang or the gripping when you feel that grief of whatever the loss is. So anyway, so people just don't know that heightened consciousness is available to them regardless of what they've been through. But you gotta know the ropes. You just gotta. And so today, this is the 5th in a series. I suggest you go back and to learn the other ones first. But today we're gonna talk about what's known in the Western kind of the Eastern medical literature, or in the martial arts literature, as the Tai Chi pole, or a famous healer, Barbara Brennan, referred to it as the line of intention. And essentially what this is a vertical power current on the body, and it literally kind of extends through the center of the body. It goes from above the head to through the pelvic floor down into the earth, okay? And we have talked about one of the spots on this line already in the 2nd video. It's the dantian in the lower abdomen. So and it's a place of basically centered and balance and poise within the body and the lower abdomen. It's also our center of gravity. So you see, again, people don't kind of understand that they're not just kind of meat suits, and they're thinking that we are these subtle energy electrical powerhouses. And when we don't understand that we are these subtle energy electrical powerhouses, we leave a lot of money on the table as far as our well-being, okay? You know, if there was at all a fountain of youth, and I'm not quite saying it is, but if there was, it would be the subtle energies of your body. It would be you understanding that you extend far beyond your body, that there is a field around your body. And when you start to recognize that this field is you, not just what's behind your eyes, not just what's in your heart, right? When you understand that, no, this is you. And by the way, this is connected to all of that, right? So you're part of a larger field of consciousness, right? So coming into command of our energetic nature helps us come into command of our consciousness. Or I don't want to say that. It helps you orient to where you are in this vast sea of consciousness, right? Because you're never going to master full consciousness. You as an entity will only see kind of a small orientation to this vast field of consciousness. But you come into command of that, and then you start to recognize that there's a whole new world going on in your life. Like, you think your life was about one thing, and you realize actually we're these infinite beings having this infinite experience. And there's a much different, broader perspective of our lives. All right, but I digress. All right, so the thing about it, when we're on this line of intention, then, as Barbara Brennan would refer to it, or the Tai Chi pole, that there is, the way she writes about it, is that there is no adversary. The way I would talk about it is, well, in the Eastern literature, it talks about like this pole is actually our soul. It's kind of where we individuate from the field, the vast field of consciousness, where we come into our own soul, so to speak. And I know some of the biblical things say our soul's in our heart. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff, but just go with me on this. And that is that in this body of work, the soul comes into itself and into this kind of, I like the way, I can see why she called it a line of intention. All right, so now the thing is when we are kind of more poised, balanced on this pole of energy, so to speak, we are basically, we are more, the way in my language, we're more calibrated to ourselves, we're more calibrated to the field, and really the bottom line of heightened consciousness is when we take our grubby little hands, I always say grubby little hands, when we reduce all of our clutching and tethering at this world, where we think everything's supposed to be the way we think it's supposed to be, and so when we're on this pole, all our grubby little hands are tethering or clutching at this world. Actually, that energy gets redirected inward so that we can stay aligned into our state of being and who we are, right? This is also along the lines of soul retrieval. I'm sure many of you have heard of that as well. That'll be another whole video that I do in the future. But just think of this as a quick and dirty soul retrieval, you getting back onto your line of intention, your pole, your Tai Chi pole, now your soul, so to speak. So now I'm going to show you how we can do this physically. If you look at, I think it's Brennan's book, second book, Light Emerging, she has a whole extensive stuff, but I'm going to show you a different way. And one is that we're going to do a meditation, and we're going to do a meditation where we are going to kind of rock back and forth over this pole, and then eventually kind of come back to center, and then eventually try to land in the center of where the pole is, so to speak. And so, and then we're going to try to relax as we're anchored on this pole. Okay, so think of it as like those old metronomes. I was a musician years ago, so I used to have this metronome on the piano, and it would always kind of go back and forth, right? It was a weighted line, so to speak. And then when I turned the metronome off, eventually it would just kind of slowly go back and eventually just go back to center, right? So this idea that that's what we're going to do in this meditation. We're going to kind of find this pole. Now, this could just seem kind of really airy, fairy, not really particularly powerful, because, and the reason why we don't understand why it's powerful is because we don't understand what consciousness is, heightened consciousness is. Heightened consciousness has a lightness about it, and we have not been taught to value this lightness, and yet that lightness is everything. When we move into that lightness of being, we are far more powerful, far more effective at manifesting things in our lives. So this idea of owning, like when we're on this line of intention, we are at peace. Okay, we're essentially at peace with ourselves and we're at peace with others. There is no adversary when we are on our line of intention. Now, I remember years ago, I had a woman come in for a session, and she was really highly distraught. Everything, just really bad. One of those points in life where everything goes wrong. One of those times. And she came in and she was a hot mess, basically. And then we did this line of intention work. We also did some energy work. And then, of course, she left buoyant and kind of full of energy. And I said, geez, don't you feel a lot better? And it was so funny because I've seen this over and over again, is she had acclimated so quickly to her own soul, to her own energy, that she couldn't even remember the kind of the hot mess she came in as, right? And that's the beautiful thing about well-being, is the fact that we will acclimate so quickly to it, we won't even remember how distraught we were. Like, that's the beauty of who we are, right? And I think it's more and more important that we calibrate to the highest and best within us, for us to know that we have the highest and best within us, and to hold that as our measuring stick, as opposed to kind of getting lost in things like, and I totally respect the body work because I use it all the time, but trauma-informed care, right? So the whole idea of this idea of we're like holding on to these traumas, and we're holding on to this grief, we're holding on to these losses, and yet really heightened consciousness is this idea of right? Is this idea that we're going to pull our energy in, ground it down into the body, hold on to our soul, and just kind of stay suspended in peace. And that is a possibility. Like, we all need to know that is a possibility. And so I'm going to encourage you this week to practice, especially if you're feeling raw about anything, you got anything big and ugly going on, command it, right? I'm known for a phrase for years, and I hold myself accountable to this all the time, and that is that I am intolerant of feeling miserable. I'm intolerant of feeling miserable because even if I'm processing through something difficult, and you could hear me grumble, But the whole time I'll process and I'll be intense about it. But the whole time I know that that's not who I am, right? So I'll work through it as quickly as possible, because we can't deny these things are happening. We can't push it under the rug, which is a big new age favorite, is to just turn your head away and go, I don't see anything, nothing's going on here. Actually, higher levels of healing, that does not happen. You have to kind of distill it and purify the emotions, right? So this idea of turning around and looking at the emotions, processing them, right? But the idea is that you're processing knowing that if you're in a negative emotion, that's just stuck energy. That's just you not being calibrated to you in the field, okay? So I'm going to encourage you from now on, if you're going to start being, consciousness athletes, we're going to start holding ourselves that we want to fall up into heightened consciousness, not fall down so much. I mean, like I said, you have to honor the process, but know that the punchline of a big grief and a big trauma is not that you have to eat it for life, right? It's not that you're here to be a kicked puppy and for the rest of your life you're supposed to be beat up over a negative thing that's happened to you. Freak, no. No, the bottom line is once we get highly skilled, you become these kind of mental ninjas and you can kind of go in and go zunk, 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 and kind of like rearrange your internal field, okay? So I'm going to encourage you this week to practice. We're going to do a meditation on it, practice. What's it like to be on this pole of intention? And you might just be like, well, what do I do here, right? That's the whole point, is the idea that you're just going to sit in beingness, and we're going to practice holding the space. So if something really terrible goes down, you're watching the news, try to stay anchored in your soul intention. I also, when I'm watching the horrible now, I just see a beautiful light going and cleansing anything I'm observing. If we can all start taking responsibility for what we're observing and cleansing it as we observe it, so that, again, why? So that we're not feeling victimized in our own energy field. And the best thing you can do for you, the safest thing you can do for you, is to have as clean, a clear, a light as possible, so that you are alert to other possibilities that you wouldn't be alert to if you were all clutching, gripping, and grasping at this world, right? So it's this idea of you are kind of always new, you're always awake, I think another word. You're always kind of aware of an unfolding without attachment to outcome, which is a tough one. That's a whole talk unto itself. But this idea that you are trusting that you are on point, you are calibrated to the field, therefore anything that happens in front of you, you will be called in the appropriate way, okay, to serve. And in the meantime, we can bless things, we can send love and light to them as we observe, but we're going to practice just holding, being calibrated to ourselves and to the divine on this line of intention, thinking of it chin up. You can imagine a string pulling from the top of your head, feet very anchored in the lower abdomen. There are 3 points on this line: lower abdomen, heart, and head. We have not really worked on these 2 dantians, but we have worked in those spaces for other purposes. And you just imagine this physical line and practice, what is that space? Take a moment, observe. How is that different than your usual way of walking through this world? And can you imagine being on your line of intention when you walk from your car to the grocery store? When you are going into a meeting, right? Can you practice just being in a meeting, right? When you're in boring meetings, this is what's got me through so much over the lives, is because I have this internal world going on. I can always entertain myself. So you're in a meeting and you just work, right? And you just start cleansing your field, hands off the wheel, blessing people around the table. Like, this is the art of living from these levels of energy inside of you. And for us to recognize that we are far more than we've been taught, and there are other ways we can work than in the physical world to make dramatic difference in our lives. And so practice this for this week. And again, next week I'll be back with something different. And let's just keep journeying together. It's so fun. All right, thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, I just say one other thing. It's funny because I've been teaching this for years, right? And so I've had so many experiences, and my own consciousness has been unfolding in beautiful ways. And so it shows me that this work has integrity, it's valid. The idea that I'm still teaching the same work after all these years because they're fundamentals, right? And so what I've learned about this line of intention, for revisiting it from where I am now, is it's really the ground of being from which the really beautiful feelings can happen, right? So it's almost like base camp for heightened consciousness. So if we can kind of get back to center. Now, I wouldn't have thought of it that way years ago when I was first teaching this. But we're going to find that the way to really manage heightened consciousness is to understand your own subtle energies, to understand your landscape. So when you know your base camp, right, that's when you can kind of expand out from that in a regular, consistent way. Now, so just understand that this is kind of like base camp. It's kind of what the rest of the more beautiful feelings will rest upon. That's what I want to say. Okay, so, and I could only see that now after years of study. All right, thank you so much. I will talk to you next week. Thank you, take care, bye-bye. Please share. We all have this ability, and just wanting more people to feel gorgeous. Okay, thank you, take care, bye-bye.